So this is round two for me. I just recorded my whole presentation and then YouTube messed up, so I'm gonna do it again. My passage is on pages 256 to 257, and while you're getting there, I'll just tell you what's going on around these pages. So winter is coming, and it's coming in fast, and her parents are still homeless. And Jeanette is afraid of how much to help and what to do for them because of what they've done for her and how she really doesn't know how to treat them now. And then after this passage, her dad's about to get sick, and then Jeanette starts her last year of college. So that's what's going on around this time. And now that you're on the pages, I will read them for you. It starts where it says, "I didn't know what to do." I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to do whatever I could to take care of Mom and Dad, and part of me just wanted to wash my hands of them. The cold came early that year, and every time I left the psychologist's apartment, I found myself looking into the faces of the homeless people I passed on the street, wondering each time if one of them would turn out to be Mom or Dad. I usually gave homeless people whatever spare change I had, but I couldn't help feeling like I was trying to ease my conscience about Mom and Dad wandering the streets while I had a steady job and a warm room to come home to. One day I was walking down Broadway with another student named Carol when I gave some change to a young homeless guy. "You shouldn't do that," said Carol. "Why? It only encourages them. They're all scam artists." "What do you know?" I wanted to ask. I felt like telling Carol that my parents were out there too, that she had no idea what it was like to be down on your luck, with nowhere to go and nothing to eat. But that would have meant explaining who I really was, and I wasn't about to do that. So at the next street corner, I went my way without saying a thing. I knew I should have stood up for Mom and Dad. I'd been pretty scrappy as a kid, and our family has always fought for one another. But back then, we'd had no choice. The truth was, I was tired of taking on people who'd ridiculed us for the way we lived. I just didn't have it in me to argue Mom and Dad's case for the world. That was why I didn't own up to my parents in front of Professor Fuchs. She was one of my favorite teachers, a tiny, dark, passionate woman with circles under her eyes, who taught political science. One day, Professor Fuchs asked if homelessness was the result of drug abuse and misguided entitlement programs, as the conservatives claimed, or did it occur, as the liberals argued, because of cuts in social service programs and the failure to create economic opportunity for the poor. Professor Fuchs called on me. I hesitated. "Sometimes I think it's neither." "Can you explain yourself?" "I think that maybe sometimes people get the lives they want." "Are you saying homeless people want to live on the street?" Professor Fuchs asked. "Are you saying they don't want warm beds and roofs over their head?" "Not exactly," I said. I was fumbling for words. "They do. But if some of them were willing to work hard and make compromises, they might not have ideal lives, but they could make ends meet." Professor Fuchs walked around from behind her lectern. "What do you know about the lives of the underprivileged?" she asked. She was practically trembling with agitation. "What do you know about the hardships and obstacles that the underclass faces?" The other students were staring at me. "You have a point," I said. So that is my passage, and I've already told you where it is, so we're going to talk about a few classical rhetorical appeals that you can find in the passage. On the third paragraph, the third large paragraph of the passage on 256, where it says, "What do you know?" in italics, this is ethos. It's questioning Jeanette's credibility, and actually it's Jeanette questioning Carol's credibility, but in the rest of the paragraph where it says, "I wanted to ask," I felt like telling Carol that my parents were out there too, that she had no idea what it was like to be down on your luck. It's talking about how Jeanette really does have more experience with the situation, how she knows what they're going through, and how she really does know the problems and the suffering and the things the underclass have to go through to live and to be happy and to try and strive. And another part of ethos is on page 257. It's pretty much the whole page, but it starts the most when it goes, "Professor Fuchs walked around from behind her lectern. What do you know about the lives of the underprivileged?" she asked. And this is Professor Fuchs testing or asking about Jeanette's credibility. And Jeanette really does have more reason and more understanding of the lives of these people than Carol and Professor Fuchs and most people out there, most people in the world, because she grew up an underprivileged upbringing and she knows what it's like to go through that. And she's literally being questioned. What do you know about the lives of the underprivileged? What do you know about the hardships and obstacles the underclass face? And this book is a testament of her credibility, that Jeanette really does know what goes on, that Jeanette knows the hardships that homeless have to face, the underprivileged have to face, and that she herself and her family personally face. So she does have credibility. She is a good source, as she's gone through the experiences and we can read about them and know exactly what happened. So she sort of denies the ethos, however. She says, you have a point. She concedes to the professor, choosing not to defend her family and her heritage just because she doesn't want to talk about it, because it's embarrassing and because it isn't a pleasant subject, and she doesn't want to be seen that way as homeless or underprivileged. So the next rhetorical appeal is pathos, and in the paragraph where it first talked about ethos, it's basically the fourth large paragraph, where it says, I knew I should have stood up for mom and dad. I'd been pretty scrappy as a kid, and our family had always fought for one another, but back then, we'd had no choice. It's pretty much pathos because it brings out emotions. It's talking about how they had no choice. They had to strive and fight to be strong and to live, and how without each other and without a family to fight for each other, they wouldn't have survived and they wouldn't have been able to strive like they do in New York. It was their upbringing, and they needed each other. They needed that love and care and devotion to the family to make it and to survive, because it is rough, and it was very rough upbringing for Jeanette, but she did make it out eventually. And next, I'm going to talk about speaker, occasion, audience, and purpose. So the speaker is Jeanette, the narrator, talking to the audience, and there's also conversations with Carol and Professor Fuchs, but the main speaker is still Jeanette, and she's using these conversations to convey a message to the audience, which is the reader. So it's basically narrator to reader conversation with smaller conversations in there to convey her message. And the occasion, I've already sort of said that in my introduction. It's when Jeanette is talking with her, or is with her family, and winter's coming. She's worried about her parents out homeless on the streets, and she's trying to figure out what to do for them. And then after that, we have her dad get sick, and she finishes her college. I'll talk about the purpose in a second. I want to get to features before, because I can connect it more easily after I've done that. So in the first long paragraph of 256, if you look, it says, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to do whatever I could to take care of mom and dad, and part of me just wanted to wash my hands of them. So it's an internal conflict. It's like self versus self. So she's fighting inside of her. She doesn't know what to do. She wants to help the people she knows she loves, but at the same time, she wants to be rid of them. She wants to wash her hands of them and move on with her life. They were never the best parents for her, and they never did the best they could. And she feels that they would have left her in the same situation they're in, and she wants to help because she does love them, but at the same time, she's angry because they didn't do all they could for the kids when they were growing up, and so she doesn't know how much she should do for the parents. The next thing is foreshadowing. It's in that same paragraph where it says, it's actually the next sentence, I found myself looking into the faces of the homeless people I passed on the street, wondering each time if one of them would turn out to be mom or dad. At the beginning of the book, like the first very small chapter about New York, Jeanette sees her mom, and she actually sees her as one of the homeless people. And this is foreshadowing to when that happens, to how she feels and how she's scared it's going to happen. And one time it actually does happen. And at the beginning, we see the emotions it brings out of her. It doesn't talk to that too much in here because it doesn't actually happen in this part. But how it upset Jeanette and how it brought out different emotions in her, like how she wanted to help but felt she couldn't, and basically her love and internal conflict for her parents wanting to help but not knowing how much, or not really being able to, because they don't always deserve help or always want it even. Okay, so the next interesting feature I talked about was structure, So the first after that paragraph with the internal conflict, you have the conversation between Carol and Jeanette, and that conversation gives reasoning to why Jeanette doesn't want to talk about her family. It says how she doesn't want to defend it, how she doesn't always want to stand up for it, how it's a lot of work, and she doesn't feel a part of that family too much anymore. And then we have a transition sentence. That was why I didn't own up to my parents in front of Professor Fuchs. So after that sentence, then the conversation is with Professor Fuchs, and we see the actual conversation. She gets questioned about her parents, and she denies it. And then the reason she denied it, we're in the first conversation with Carol. She connects those two passages by talking about the conflict with her mom and dad and not wanting to speak up about it. So the purpose of this passage, it shows the change in Jeanette, how at the beginning she was her dad's little mountain goat, and she always did what he wanted and always respected him and admired him and stood up for him, because at times he wasn't the best father, and how the entire family had to stand up for each other. But now she's just trying to better herself, and she realizes that her parents aren't the best people for her. They're not going to help her be better people in the world, and without them, she can strive and succeed in New York. And with them, they'll both bring her down and just bring sort of destruction to the family again. They're often not helping each other, and when one gets in a good situation, they make more trouble. So she just believes it was best for her to move on from her family, and not completely, but move on from her family to a certain degree where she can be successful and they can be on their own. She didn't. It was just how she realizes she doesn't need the family. How while she'll always care for them and love them, that she's better off without her dad and without her mom, because they aren't the right people for her to spend her life with, as they won't help her succeed, won't help her be a better person. They just bring trouble. And that is my presentation. Thank you.